All right, welcome everybody. I'd like to introduce our two guest speakers tonight. We first have Professor Prudence Pitter, who is an experienced business executive with more than 20 years of broad human resource management expertise. Her expertise spans the hospitality, nonprofit, retail, financial services, technology, healthcare, and higher education industries. She has worked extensively with board of directors, executives, senior managers, and various business leaders in optimizing the productivity, morale, and culture of the workforces. In addition, she has successfully led globalization efforts, mergers and acquisitions, openings and closings, workplace crisis and disasters, negotiations, building and relocating corporate headquarter operations, public and community relations, as well as building HR departments. In addition to a progressive HR career, she has been teaching human resource management for more than 8 years and operated her own consulting practice where she assisted organizations in need of creating or enhancing their people practices. She holds a bachelor's degrees in business administration and human resource management, a master's in business administration, and the highest distinctions in the human resources profession, the Global Professional in Human Resources, and the Senior Professional in Human Resources certifications. Professor Pitter enjoys traveling, reading, and time with her family. And we're also joined by Lazette Jackson, who is the ALM Global LLC and the Vice President of Professional Education and Practical Insight Publications. Lazette is an entrepreneurial executive with experience in key areas of business management that includes successful leadership, team development, strategic organizing, and planning with C-suite executives, along with business process improvement. Visionary thinker that learns each part of the business thoroughly. Lazette has a long tenure with ALM Media LLC, where she serves in various positions, including mailroom clerk, legal publication administration, and continuing education coordinator. Understanding the vision of ALM prompted Lazette to build a professional education department within the company. The department started with Lazette and a coordinator and has expanded to a team of 11 direct reports across 2 states. In her capacity of business leadership, she was promoted to Vice President of Professional Education, where she focuses on product and digital platform development, customer experience, and business strategy. Separate from her executive position, Lazette is a licensed personal trainer specializing in resistance training, mobility, and stability. Lazette is a member of the MELO, which stands for Management, Entrepreneurship, Leadership Organization, and will complete her credits for her Bachelor of Science at CUNY SPS in December of 2022 and receive her degree in 2023. And I'll now pass it on to our speakers.
Okay, just one small correction. My name is pronounced Lazette.
Sorry.
It's okay, Parsh. It's okay. All right, so I can actually start with asking a question to Professor Pitter to get the conversation going. And as Parsh mentioned, if there's any questions in the chat, we'll answer those as well. So my first question for you, Professor Pitter, is what skills and qualities are most important to the success of 21st century managers?
Great, thanks, Lazette. I'll pause for a second to say thanks, Sparsh. Thanks for that great intro, and welcome to all the students. I see I have at least one fan in the chat, so that makes me super excited. It's good to be able to speak to you all today. So your questions, what skills and qualities? I love that this focuses not only on the skills, but it's also important that core qualities is a part of the equation because it plays an important role in management. One of the words that I get a little bit hung up on in my career is management. I feel that managers are able to take good care of what is already in place. where leaders are able to be more agile. They're able to change with the times, focus on the human aspect of their role and the people that they lead. And they're also able to balance the business nicely with the people aspect. So I like to pause and make that small distinction, if you will. But the skills that I believe are most necessary for our leaders today, and certainly beyond, they include not only being able to be fully involved in the business, and the ways to be fully involved in the business is to understand the industry that the organization is in. Also understand what are the important values that the leadership team is focused on right now. So really staying close to what drives revenue, what drives the business, what keeps the leaders up at night, and tie that into people operations, tie that into how to best upskill the workforce, and tie that into what's the most important communication and training that is needed for employees. So that's certainly one, that business acumen and truly staying close to the industry as well as the organization that you're a part of. The other part, and I think COVID has definitely taught us this, is being able to be agile. So being able to be flexible, being able to adjust to the times and adapt to everything that's happening around us. That is really a core competency for leaders to have, in addition to the basics, if you will, of the job. So what's written in the job description and what you've done before, you're usually hired for those particular skills. But once you're in the role, being able to stay real close to the leaders, real close to the industry and the business, and then having that extra muscle to be able to flex with the times will definitely set leaders up for success.
Yes, I definitely agree with what you said. And just kind of like extending on that, I also, in terms of like the adaptability, I'll add to that strategy, communication, and clarity. So it's up to leadership to provide what is the overall goal and what does the strategy look like to obtain that goal, and then making sure they have the proper resources in place to implement it. And I'll give an example. So in my bio, Parse mentioned I manage a team of 11. In that team of 11, there's 4 products that I oversee. So each product has a different goal. So one may be improving the customer experience. The other may be increasing revenue or retaining customers, whatever that picture looks like. And team members are assigned to those products. So I encourage business leaders, managers, to make sure that your vision is clear in terms of exactly what you want to do. Make sure that you have the proper resources to implement it, and that'll help your direct reports understand what the next steps are and how they can participate in the overall goal.
That's awesome. I like that you added that particular example. I'm sure that helps our students with clarity as it relates to some of their own business experience, as well as some of the case studies that might be available to them, and being able to connect those dots. But it also leads me to a question for you, Lazette. How can educators, so how can our professors equip our students to anticipate and also meet the industry demands?
Yeah, so I am in my last semester as a senior with CUNY, and at the same time, I have the the leadership role at work. So I guess I'm kind of like a unicorn in this situation. But I would say that the professors need to make sure that the curriculum is updated. So if there's a textbook and it's the 2015 version versus the 2021 version, make sure you have the 2021 version, because that might have more information about technology and how that's changed. And then also understand that individuals learn differently. So I like listening to YouTube videos to help me with my learning, to support it. And it's free, so students don't have to pay for that. So YouTube videos, podcasts, and the professors at CUNY SPS have been great, because they actually will give YouTube links and different things like that. And I subscribe to some of those channels so that in my professional career, if I want to just look at something that I remember from school, I know that there's a YouTuber out there that can can help me with what I'm trying to figure out. So that has been very, very helpful for me. And some other students mentioned it's been helpful as well.
That's awesome. I like the fact that you talk about the different versions of the textbooks, and it's a lot to keep up with, but that's a great way for students to be able to get a taste of the workplace, because it's a lot to keep up with and things keep changing. No matter what industry that you're in, there's almost a guarantee that things will continue to change. And I personally feel that the case studies that we use and that we are exposed to in our courses is only good for a limited time period. So those professors who include additional information and inspire students to continue to be lifelong learners, whether it's listening to a podcast, subscribing to a YouTube channel, subscribing to different TED Talks, following different organization and different groups on whether it be LinkedIn or different social media platforms, those are the individuals who will be able to have that fresh and new information and be on the receiving end of changes. So in addition to recognizing that the textbooks change, the case studies change and get outdated, helping the students realize that they need to continue to be lifelong learners and presenting them with the resources that they can use to continue to upskill and keep information fresh is definitely something that will carry on beyond the degree, beyond the course, and certainly is absolutely useful.
Definitely. Should I? I have another question for Professor Pitter, but I just wanted to pause and see if there was any questions, Parsh, that we should stop for.
None yet, but I will keep you posted if there is.
Okay, all right, no problem. So this is an important question to me, and I want your perspective on it. What effect has the COVID-19 pandemic had on your management practices or leadership practices?
Yeah, so COVID-19, right? So the 2-week shutdown that keeps on giving. I think for me, I've always prided myself as being a really good communicator. What COVID has taught me is that I need to be more consistent with how I communicate, and I also need to be creative in how I communicate. And what I mean by that is my communication was reaching employees in different locations across the country and sometimes across the globe, depending on the role that I had been in. But those employees, for the most part, were either in an office or regularly would go into an office. When we went into a hybrid model or a totally virtual model, I had even more important information, more timely information to communicate to employees. And I had to not only make sure that I was communicating that, but I had to double check and ensure that the message was received and that the message was understood. And I also had to take the time to learn the different ways that worked for employees. So for example, in one particular industry that I was in at the time of the shutdown, we had employees who were of various ages. So there were some employees who were just not used to using a QR code. They weren't used to clicking on a link. So there was some training that went with that. And that meant that I had to be flexible and hold different Zoom meetings on a Sunday afternoon because that was the best time for individuals, or at 6 a.m. because that was the best time for some individuals. So repeating my message, sending my message in different ways and verifying to ensure that it was received and that it was understood, and finding the different ways that employees receive information. Because again, what companies are sharing with employees are usually timely. So it would be such a waste of time and could be detrimental in some ways if information was being shared and not received, or if it was received and not understood. So it really taught me to step out of my comfort zone, get to learn more about the employees and finding different ways to communicate. And some of those communication had to do with mental health. And as we have heard, the mental health crisis has now been called a new pandemic, and it's real. So when I found out information about different employees, I had to make sure that I tap into the other employees to protect them as best as we could. We had employees who passed away during COVID, unfortunately, so we had to provide grief services to employees. And of course, the ones that were not responding were the ones that I had to make sure that I rolled out all the stops to ensure that the information was received to them. Now we're at the point where it's still communication again, but continue to communicate. And part of that communication is normalizing things like mental health and not necessarily focus on mental health is good for seeing a therapist, but mental health is also about, are you getting enough sleep? And, you know, sending out information under the title of mental health that helps employees normalize mental health so that if and when they have an issue, they have those resources and the barriers are somewhat broken down.
Yeah, that's actually a great example and a great way to support, staff and everything like that. Similar to you, I had to also be sensitive to the employees' needs. My example is, so I provide CLE services. That stands for Continuing Legal Education for the legal industry. So lawyers come to conferences and they want to get their credits. Now, when lawyers need to get their credits and their compliance date is coming, they can be really aggressive, and say, hey, I need to get my credits. I need to make sure it's there on time. And they were used to in-person services. But because one of my employees did not feel comfortable with going to in-person conferences in the beginning of 2021, where the pandemic had died down, and they were still starting to just open things, we had a couple of in-person conferences, and I checked with her and I said, hey, do you feel comfortable going to the conference? She said, no, I don't. So what I did was I said, okay, let's be effective as possible and come up with a way where we can provide the services virtually. So we successfully did that. It was some tech glitches here and there. But now that we're back fully in person, that conference that we provided the virtual services for, I'm here now. I'm actually in Washington, D.C. at a conference. And, the women that have come to this conference annually came over and said, oh, you guys are back and everything. Thank you. I got my credits when I needed it, when you provided virtual services. And we just try to do the best with what we had while still fulfilling the business goal, but not making anyone feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, like checking on them, hey, are you getting enough sleep? If you see their performance changing, that's an indicator, because I meet with my team one-on-one. I know it's a team of 11, but I still try to connect with them at least some people once a week, depending on what they're doing, but the minimum of once a month. And I try to connect with them. I want to see how they're doing, talk about their performance and different things like that, and just make sure that they can stay on track and that their goals are not too overwhelming for them. And if they are, if there's any sort of resources that I can give them, or maybe I can just provide some of my leadership skills and see where I can help them.
That's awesome. I love that you have the one-on-ones with employees. It's really important. I too have one-on-ones with employees, and I always pause to ask, how are things going professionally and personally? And I change the way I ask it sometimes to ensure that I get the right response, and it doesn't just become a check the box exercise. Pausing and having that eye contact, whether it's on Zoom or in person, really makes a difference. And this actually leads me to a question for you, Lazette, about authentic communication. How can managers promote rich and authentic communication with and among employees to not only increase engagement, but to also mitigate uncertain and challenging times?
That's a good question. It ties to the answer that I gave to the previous one. I would say get them comfortable with interacting with you and also with each other. So I have strategy meetings with my team. I'll tell them what the vision is and what we're trying to do. And I'll say, so now you give me some ideas. And I won't let anyone not give me an idea, because I want to know, one, that you're thinking, two, that you're engaged, and three, so you can know that I heard you and you're participating in the project. that went very well for a project that we had to do for contract renewals. So we were short on resources, and we needed to renew contracts, and I had zero sales support. So I said, hey, you all know these clients very well. Why don't you renew the contracts for me, and I'll give you commission for renewing the contracts? And like Lazette, I'm not comfortable. I'm not a salesperson. I said, but you're not selling. You're actually talking about the service that you provided for years and saying that we're just renewing the contract. And every contract that you renew, I will give you a bonus for it. So the end result of that project was that we had a 99% renewal rate for the contracts. The team was really excited, and they were able to interact with clients we had for years in a different capacity. So it was, if I think that, again, that goes back to talking to them, strategy meetings. What are your thoughts? Give me some insight sort of conversations, and then they feel like they're part of the team and part of the project.
That's awesome. I love the fact that you've added in incentives as well. Definitely an awesome driver to not only productivity, but also to gaining trust. And one of the things that I encourage leaders to do is to show their authentic self. So in addition to asking employees how they're doing and getting to know employees and what makes them tick, what are their pet peeves, share as well. Help employees to realize that leaders are human as well, and that they have challenges, and that they struggle to make it to the gym, and that they have to pick up their children, or they have an elderly parent that they take care of. So don't overshare. I'm certainly not sending that message, but at the same time, to be able to inspire authenticity in employees, it's also important for leaders to meet employees at least part of the way, to be able to allow both of them to step out of their comfort zones and being able to have that regular dialogue. So if and when something major happens, the trust has already been built. There's already that relationship. There's already that camaraderie. And so it's not a huge step to get to the point of sharing, should there be that need.
Yes.
So we do have a question in the chat. It's
Awesome.
okay.
Yeah.
So Kim says, pushback takes on a variety of forms, but it refers to an employee's or leader's resistance to methodology, culture, processes, procedures, or changes in the workplace we as leaders or employees see as an efficiency. What are your recommendations for leaders who are in charge of a P&L, customer success, and product delivery when receiving pushback from the managers or their direct reports?
That's a great question. I think if you have any number of years of experience, you have at least one example of receiving pushback, regardless of your role. In different organizations, it could be very different. So for me, in my past, what I have done is I'm making sure that whatever it is that I'm working on is aligned to what the overall mission and vision is of the organization, and that also that I am connecting with the right stakeholders as it relates to what I am working on. So when I do receive pushback, I usually ask the question, so why am I getting the pushback? What is it that is missing? Sometimes it could be a matter of miscommunication and laying the groundwork as far as clarifying expectations is all that it takes. But sometimes it could be individuals feeling as if you're stepping on their toes. So is what you're doing not aligned with what they're doing? And sometimes it takes intervention, being able to connect with the senior leadership team and or the individual who's the head of the department, if you're in the same departments, to help to mitigate and to talk through whatever the miscommunication or differences in opinion are. But usually pushback is met favorably with explanation and clarification and communication as it relates to, this is how it ties to the vision and the mission of the organization. These are my marching orders, if you will. These are my goals, and this is how this leads to my goals, and that could many times help before actually needing to go to a higher authority for additional support.
That's a great answer that you actually kind of took some of the words out of my mouth in terms of communication and different things like that. You laid it out perfectly. I have nothing to add to that perfect statement.
Thanks, Lazette. And Kim, if you do have additional thoughts or questions, if that wasn't clear, please do add to the chat again. We'll be happy to continue.
We have another question from Nicole, and she asks, how do you teach your employees that failing is still learning and not negative?
That's awesome. Lazette, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I actually want to take that one. And so I'm going to put on two hats with this question, my business hat and my personal training hat, because it's the same. It's kind of like the same thing with both. All right. So in business, you're teaching your employees that failing is growth. So if you fail at something, the most successful people have failed, multiple times in some cases to get to a point of success. So as long as you're learning from those experiences, then you can apply that to either not make the same mistake in the future, or just overall taking the lesson and moving forward when it don't sit in it too long. One of my good friends always says that, whose name is Kim. Don't sit in it too long. And if putting kind of like on a personal training hat, it's kind of like if you are on a diet and you're saying, hey, I want to lose 20 pounds by this amount of time, and you work with a trainer and they'll help you get to your goals, but then you fall off. It's not that you failed, you just need to get back on track. What do you need to focus on to get back on track? And then you can understand what works for your body, what doesn't, and those sorts of things. So it's kind of like, it's not about I didn't meet my goal and I failed. It's I didn't meet my goal and something happened. Let's figure out how to either pivot, learn from it, but again, not sitting in it too long where it just stops you from being productive.
I love that, Lazette, and I love the fact that you're able to share personal as well as professional. We've all been there, right, with the January 1st resolution, and we're going to lose those 20 pounds. You're working on the summer body, and summer comes and goes, and you still, haven't hit the summer body. But it's about motivating yourself and being able to continue to go. And very similar in the workplace, leaders who are able to share. You said it perfectly about the most successful people have shared the different failures that they have had. And I was surprised as I got older and more established in business, how many people who I admire and look up to have hit walls and have had major failures in different ways, whether it's financial or professional. And, even some of the actors and actresses that we probably love and admire, to hear that they have heard no, it was like, are you kidding me? So I think sharing those stories and being able to continue to communicate authentically helps others recognize that failure is certainly not the end. We've all had those stories.
Mm-hmm.
Parsh, is it okay if I ask Lazette another question?
Sure, go ahead.
Awesome. So the question I have for you, Lazette, is what best practices have been effective as it relates to leading a remote workforce during the pandemic? What have you seen?
Leading a remote workforce, different points of communication, and also accountability. So you want to make sure that you're communicating with your team in whatever capacity you can. So if it's a quick question or something like that, maybe it's an instant message. But if it's an extensive question, then that needs to be either an email. And if it takes, my business rule, and it, everyone can modify it the way they see fit, is if it takes 3 emails to get an answer, then we need to hop on a call. So whatever form of communication to address anything, then you figure out what works best for your setup. And also accountability. Again, at the end of the day, there are business goals, whether it's revenue or anything like that. You want to make sure that you can meet the business goals, but at the same time, so that means that everyone has to be accountable for whatever part that they play. And sometimes things are out of sight, out of mind, and that's where one-on-ones come in, having those conversations with employees. Hey, So we have this project, here's your part that you're playing. How are you pacing on your goals? Oh, I noticed that I gave you this assignment last week. Where's the delay in your deliverables and understanding that? So really thorough, effective communication, reminding them of the goals and why. It's important. One of my team members told me that they like that I explain why it's important and give them insight into the company that they don't see, because I deal with the executives. So I would give them more information saying, hey, we need to really make sure that we pull this together because here's how it affects, other things. So communicating is key, and also accountability as well.
That's awesome. And I'm sure the students have definitely heard that as a theme in what we have shared today. I think there are two important things in HR: communicating and documenting. Those two go hand in hand. But definitely during COVID, if you're not a strong communicator, then you're not winning, right? To be able to win, you really have to communicate. And to your point, one thing I'd add, Lazette, is to communicate often and honestly, because sometimes we share information and we change the meaning or we change what fits in, but employees have information at their fingertips. So making sure that you're never caught in a situation where you're not being authentic, you're not being honest, you're not sharing the most relevant information really helps to build that trust. And another thing that I've found during the pandemic is, prior to the pandemic, when we were in the workforce, the hallway and the water cooler conversations were more effective than we thought. So you could actually have a mini training session in the hallway, right? Your employee stop you as you're going in two different directions just to get clarification, and it's a quick eye-to-eye conversation, and that's all they needed to be on their way. And to your point, if you're going 3 emails back and forth, then you need to hop on a call. But giving employees the tools that they need to be successful was so important, because not all the employees were working at the same time. So the leader might be 9 to 5 while the employee is trying to work after hours after their children went to bed. So giving them tools that they needed was also critically important, for sure.
Yeah, that's actually a great example. I did that with one of my employees that needed to just log on a little bit later. And again, if the work is getting done and we're meeting the business goals, I am happy to show some sort of flexibility, because there's going to be times where we can't provide that flexibility. And, if we say yes to like 3 things and say no to 1, then I don't think that's bad.
I agree. I agree.
So we have a question from Diana. She writes, there is a new trend in the HR world termed quiet quitting. Studies are showing that this is a result of bad leadership or bad interaction between employees and their leaders. What recommendations do you have for employees who find themselves quiet quitting?
Wow.
I thought the question was going to be towards the managers. Creative there, Diane. Question is for the employees. Very cool. So quiet quitting, I think in the past, it was about employees who were checked out, doing the bare minimum. I think now it has a very different name, but the thought process is that the employees, maybe because they've put in a lot of effort and it's not being recognized, or maybe it's because there are a ton of people reaching out to them on LinkedIn and they know that they have options, but for various reasons, employees are quiet quitting. They are doing the bare minimum, they're flying under the radar, and they're just waiting for that next opportunity to move on. I encourage employees, if they feel psychologically safe, and I pause to say if they feel psychologically safe, because not all employees are in an environment where they have that psychological safety, where they have that open dialogue, and where they feel that they can truly share what is causing them to consider leaving the organization. So if you have that open door, whether it's direct conversations with your manager, or whether it's direct conversation with HR, or indirectly through a method as far as it relates to a survey or sharing information indirectly, share that information so that even if you don't stay with the organization, you can help make it a better place for the next person to come. So that's one advice that I would give, is to share the reasons why you consider the workplace not to be a good one. And from sharing, you could potentially see some improvement, Or it might be a situation where they're kind of throwing it back at you, meaning the management team is saying, this is the environment. And so, you know, you can choose to be a part of it or not. In addition to that, I would encourage the employee to be as positive as possible. And I say that because while I know firsthand that it's difficult to be positive in a negative situation, it helps you, the individual. So if you're going through a difficult time and you're getting to the point of, I'm just going to do the bare minimum, you know, not to get written up or not to get terminated until I find the next role, try to be as positive as possible. This world is small, so your manager could be one of your employees in the future, or your manager could be your manager at the next job. So you definitely want to make sure that you stay positive, you don't burn bridges, and that you try to share as much relevant and useful information as you can to help the workplace be better, either for you or for the next people coming on.
Yeah, I definitely believe in leaving a work environment with positive relationships, because you never know, you know, when you may need someone. Just the world is just about networking and keeping good relationships, but sometimes that's not possible depending on if it's a very, very toxic environment that's messing with mental health and different things like that. So I think it's probably circumstances where it may not be applicable to leave with those great relationships because it was so toxic that you just had to get out of there. But overall, you want to leave a place where if you needed a recommendation or anything like that, you just never know. People need people. So you just want to try to do your best with that.
Yeah, well said. People need people. I agree with you.
And Diana asked another question. She writes, as a follow-up question, for the leaders/managers, how should they approach someone who they suspect is quiet quitting?
I'll take that one. I think that plays into one-to-ones. So I'm very big on overall team meetings and then one-to-one. So if I see someone that participated a lot in the beginning in conversations that we have, and then now they're just barely answering my questions, I'll, you know, ask them different things on our one-on-one. You know, how's everything going? I noticed that you're not really participating as much. Is everything going okay? That sort of thing, and see what I get out of that. Hopefully the employee is honest, and if they're not, it's up to you to kind of like think about, all right, what are next steps if this is a pattern? But I think your one-to-ones and your team meetings and just watching for different sorts of patterns where you can know what sort of conversation you need to have on the one-on-one will be helpful in figuring that out. May not solve the problem, but it can help towards some sort of solution.
That's awesome, Lazette. Well, I'd piggyback on that. I totally agree with you with the one-on-ones. And I said this a little bit before as well. Changing up the way you ask the same questions can help you get different results from your employees. I had one particular employee ask at the end of our meetings, is there anything else that I can do to help your job be stronger? And he always said, or your work environment be better. And he always said, no, I'm good. No, I'm good. And then once I said to him, if there's one thing that I could do for you, what would that be? And he said, can you get me a shoebox full of 50s? And so we had a good laugh about that. That wasn't in the cards, but I learned to kind of change up the question as it relates to employees, and then diving in a little bit deeper when you see those signs and sharing what you notice. I noticed that you don't speak up as much in the team meetings. Is there anything that I can do to encourage you to be more communicative during the meetings? And during one-on-one, in group meetings, I normally change up the order. So in the team, I don't start with the same person always. I don't end with the same person always. So I don't always give the same person the last time to go, and I don't always have the same person as the first person to go. So keep them a little bit on their toes, making sure that they're ready to share. But of course, if there's a quiet quitting that is seen or suspected, that I would handle in those one-on-ones and just asking those direct questions in different ways.
Okay, that's great. I want to make sure we get the audience questions. If not, then I have a question for Professor Pitter.
We had one question, another question.
Okay.
Indy writes, how would you address in the situation when your leader needs better communication skills with the staff without being rude?
This one is fresh. So last Friday, I received an email from one of the leaders that I support. It was a forward of an employee who said, I'm not working for that manager because they have really poor communication skills. And so I said, let's the three of us get on a call without the manager that the complaint was about to talk it through. And there were several areas that were picked up along the way during that communication where the employee who was complaining also had some concerns. But the piece that I was able to action was this was a new manager who just started leading others and hadn't had the opportunity to truly pause and learn those softer skills. So organizations do this all the time. There's a really high performer who is promoted because they're a high performer, but a high performer is not always ready and equipped to lead others. So that was an opportunity for the leader and I to pause and really put into action a particular plan for this individual to set her up for success. But we did not remove that employee from the manager because there was a complaint. We use that as an opportunity to train this individual, set her up for success, and also to slow down the process, connect with other leaders to say, let's ensure we're setting individuals up for success before putting them in a place of leadership. So my answer to the question would be to share with the leaders that you do see areas for communication improvement, and or share that with HR. So share that directly if you feel safe and confident that you should do that, or share it indirectly to help those individuals improve. Communication is an important skill when you're a manager of people. And so if that skill is lacking, I encourage you to share that information with individuals who can truly make a difference.
Excellent. I think that'll be really helpful for individuals to do that. And that prompted the other question that's kind of like tied to that question that the one of the students asked. So what is one of the biggest mistakes that you've made as a manager, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so I started managing others young, and so I'll blame it on my youth. But one of the things that I wanted from my team was I wanted them to work the way I worked. So I thought that I was a manager because I was getting it right. I was knocking it out of the park. And so if they're not doing it like me, then they're doing it wrong. And that led me to being a micromanager. And I was actually starting to get burned out micromanaging my team, but I truly thought that that was the way to do it. I had to make sure all the I's were dotted and all the T's were crossed, and that I had to know what everyone was doing. Well, I had an individual who resigned about 4 months into the role, and her exit interview was a huge eye-opener for me. One, she called out some of the ways that I communicated. So she took real offense to me saying ASAP as I asked for things. So to this point in my career, that was many years ago, I will never put ASAP in an email. I will ask for a deadline and make sure that it works well. But I also recognize that I'm going to continue to lose members of my team if I don't trust them to do the job that I was hired to do. So what I did was I ensure that going forward, I train individuals. I make sure that they're totally aligned and that they're equipped to do the job. Once I know that they're fully trained, we stay connected, we communicate, but I allow them to develop. And I give myself space to develop and grow as well. And I don't micromanage anymore, but I make sure that I am available for communication and I am available for those additional clarifying questions. Lazette, you mentioned something earlier as it relates to sharing information with employees about the why. And that's one thing as I developed as a leader that I learned along the way, that employees are more tied to what they're doing in their role once they know why they're actually doing it. But thankfully, I learned this earlier on. I'm able to help others as I see them going down the path where I was going down of, micromanaging, you're pretty much doing your job as a leader and then doing the employee's job too, if you have to check on everything that they do, but it allows you as a leader to grow and the employee to grow. It helps you with succession planning and so much more. But I learned that early on for sure.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things that I've learned from, so I surround myself with a lot of people in management, professionally and personally. I actually see some of my supporters on here because I'm seeing names pop up. So I'm smiling at the screen and talking at the same time. But one of the things that I made a mistake earlier on is managing everyone the same. And I had to realize that people were individuals. It's actually a conversation I had with my fiance because he said, you can't manage everybody the same way. They're individuals. So I kind of looked at it like, okay, I don't manage my children the same. I have a son and I have a daughter, and they're two different people. So I don't treat them, and it's not because one is male and one is female. It's because they're just different individuals. So it was easy to kind of change my mindset because I have to kind of like treat my kids equally, but parent them differently. So I took that same sort of mindset, not that I'm going to treat my employees like children, but I am going to treat them as individuals in terms of the way they need to be managed. So someone might be a little bit more sensitive. If maybe I might say ASAP to one employee and they're like, okay, Lazette, I'll get on it. I know we have this deadline, where someone else might be sensitive to me saying ASAP, like, well, I'm trying as hard as I can. So again, I go back to the one-on-ones, understanding my employees as much as I possibly can. And then also just looking at them as individuals and saying, how can I be as effective as possible to reach the goal, but understanding that this person reacts differently to my other team members.
I like the fact that you mentioned your children. My children have definitely helped me to become a better leader. I have 5 children and they are very different. And my oldest, I try to raise the way I was raised, and that didn't work out. And now my second daughter, she's in her 3rd year of college and she's studying psychology. So Lord knows I am her favorite person to practice on, but I'm learning so much more about my communication style, my leadership style, about people and how messages land. And it really is the best practice, if you will, as it relates to your point. Our employees are not our children, but it's a great way to realize how, when we communicate, those who are not afraid to give us feedback, how it lands on them. And then we realize that others might not be as upfront. So we could change and shift our communication, in the workplace.
You have a question from Tachia. She writes, what happened if you give the employee an opportunity to work independently and they fail to deliver? When do you know when to change the management style?
I love this one because I've definitely dealt with this throughout the pandemic. So managers are used to having the employees right there and being able to touch base and adjust as needed. But when employees are sent home, some literally with their work desk and their work set up home, because not everybody had a laptop and the setup to just work from home. But one of the questions that I received consistently was, how do I know that this individual is performing? Or what do I do now that they're not performing under the new guidelines, if you will? So for the first part, how do you know that the employees is performing? You, the leader, have to ensure that you're clear about what the expectations are and how those are going to be measured. Once you're clear with that and you know that the employee understands what is expected and they're not delivering, then it's time for the hard conversation. And I always start those hard conversations with a question. What are the reasons why you were not able to deliver on this goal? What are the reasons why you were not able to make this particular meeting? I know some leaders get very stuck on employees being on video or not being on video. I am a little bit more lenient with that as long as I have contact with the employee face-to-face at some point during the week. I'm not the person who always needs every employee to always be on video during every meeting. So sometimes I'll readdress concerns if they are trivial in my mind, and I'll talk that through with the manager. But once the expectations are set and they're clearly not being met, it's important to find out from the employee what are the reasons. So could the employee be facing a personal challenge? Are there services and resources available within the organization that could help the employee overcome that? If it's a situation where the employee is not able to adjust to the organization, and if there are new responsibilities, then is it a matter of the employee needing additional skills? Can you provide those trainings? Or is it a matter of the employee just thinking, oh, so you actually check when I'm home? Because there's some employees who they're working from home, but they're not as disciplined to get the work done. So it could be a matter of, oh snap, I thought because I wasn't in the workplace that you wouldn't check. All right, let me get to that. But you won't know that until you actually have that conversation with the employee and find out what their barriers are, if any.
Yeah, I actually agree with that as well. I'm going to leave time. I know it's at 7:25, so I don't want to give a long answer, but I've dealt with that in situations, and my pre-pandemic approach is different than my approach from right now, which is definitely checking in with the employee, seeing if everything is okay, and then making sure, hey, did I communicate this clearly? Because if I'm in my case where I'm managing 4 products, each team member is assigned to different products, I need to make sure that what I said was, that I gave good instructions and provided clarity. So I might ask the employee, hey, so this was a deliverable, it's not met, what's going on your end? And hear that feedback and be open to the fact that I could have been the one that made the mistake in terms of communicating it, which happens. Or it can be something that the employee is going through, or the task may be something that's over their head. But you'll know that through communicating with that person.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Do you guys want to ask one more question, or should we wrap it up with any questions from the audience?
I can either wrap it up, or I had a DEI question for Professor Pitter, but I don't know if it's time for that within 4 minutes. So
go for it. I'll make it quick. I'll watch the time.
Okay. All right. So do you think that modern organizations are doing a good job promoting practices and support for DEI initiatives?
On second thought, don't go for it. Not that one.
Not that one? Okay.
I'm kidding. No. I was only kidding. No, it's interesting. In all seriousness, this is a difficult one for organizations. So do I think modern organizations are doing the best that they can, if you will, as it relates to DEI? No, I think that there is a lot of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but not enough action. And many organizations look at diversity as the entry level employees and not diversity at the top. And I get it, not all organizations can change their leadership team overnight, but they can start to make the right steps to get there. So it could be an organization that is bringing in an outside source to help the minorities in their workforce see individuals in powerful positions that look like them. So whether it's inviting a speaker to the all hands meeting or setting up a mentorship program with another organization or with their employee assistance program, making sure that employees have mentors and sponsors that look like them and that give them something to aspire to beyond just the role that they're in. Because we all want to grow, we all want to continue to learn, but it's harder to see the top, if you will, if we're not able to see individuals that look like us in those positions. So again, those organizations that don't have that diversity at the top can still find ways to include it by inviting us, Lazette. You know, they could invite us to speak to their employees and different ways to truly get diversity, equity, inclusion into the DNA of the organization. I made it. I did it on time.
Great. I'll say a quick 30-second thing just related to diversity, because you said people that look like you. So I was promoted to vice president this year. I think it was August or something like that. But when Parsh read my bio, I used to work in the mailroom at ALM. And I climbed up the ranks throughout the years, and recent position is a VP. The group that celebrated the hardest, I thought it would be my friends, and they're great, and they did. But it was actually the mailroom. Because I was them, I look like them, and I'm in this position, and at least a few of them came up to me and said, Lazette, you're pushing us to show us that we can do it too. And that just made everything worth it for me. So,
and that's a great way to wrap up. That's a great 30-second answer. Congratulations to you, Lazette, and thanks for paving the way for so many. That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Parsh.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to email me and I will pass along to our speakers. And thank you so much for everybody for joining us tonight.
It's great to see so many people. Have a good night.
All right.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marco.
To my supporters, I'm going to turn my phone back on so I can I can say thank you for coming and we can act silly. So have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
You too.
All right.
Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.